Well, good morning. Come on, we're going to do that again. Good morning. Nice. Okay, so I'm going to riff a little bit off of what Chris just talked to you about. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and my understanding looking at the agenda is that I'm the only uniformed military officer who gets the opportunity to address you, so thank you for picking the correct service to do that. I really appreciate that. I had the pleasure to work with Chris over a couple of months this year. I'm relatively new in the job, about a year, and my background is as a submarine officer. So I was trained in the ways of the submarine to include the propulsion plant. Spent a lot of time underwater. That's a dangerous combination. And throughout a career in submarining, I appreciate as much as anybody the impact of power and energy on your ability to execute the mission, and in fact, just to survive. So we take it all with us when we go in the submarine service. We take it all with us when we go across the naval service. That includes the Marine Corps. And that's some of our unique challenge. So my submarine background prepared me for being the chief of naval research-ish. I stepped into this ecosystem not fully understanding the legacy of what had gone before me, and so I took a moment to try to understand it. And then once I understood it, I'm on a bit of a mission, if you will, to make sure that everybody I contact understands how we got where we are now and the shoulders of the giants that we are standing on as we think about how we weave scientific discovery into capability for naval power. So if you want to go to the first picture, if you would, please. Going to go back to a little bit of our roots. We were created, the Office of Naval Research, which is part of the ecosystem that I manage. Office of Naval Research was created as a result of what we learned as a country in the conflict that we call World War II. We were not ready for that conflict. We were not ready for the role that technology would play, and we were not ready for the speed at which we had to move a scientific discovery all the way through to capability at scale. And we weren't ready on day one, even though we saw it coming, and it took us several years to get ourselves to a point where we were now taking advantage of those technologies at scale to be able to enhance the capabilities of the warfighter. So that's a lesson that we didn't want to forget coming out of that conflict. So the Office of Naval Research was created. And that's the legislation. You see a piece of it there. And that is very important as we consider our position today, right? So naval power is important in the competitive space that we find ourselves in today as the United States. The United States and our like-minded allies and partners want to keep the maritime space open for commerce, economic advancement, general freedom. So we want that to occur. To do that, we have to have naval power present to deter those who would want to exercise a different endpoint through what you could do on the world's oceans. So it's certainly not a surprise to you that 90% of the world's commerce moves on the oceans. Without that commerce moving on the oceans freely, we would not have the economic engine that exists today. You all know that. Your United States Navy and our allies and partners ensure the freedom of those seas to do all of that work. All right, so this future naval power that you see referenced here, that those who went before us were so visionary to create an institution that would bind scientific discovery to a use by an entity like the United States Navy for the furtherment of naval power, and academic institutions and our defense industry, which can bring these things to scale. So wrap that all together and you have a pretty good model. That model has done pretty well for us for a number of years, since 1946. So it's gone through a Cold War, it's gone through a post-Cold War era, and now it's in a competitive space today where I took a moment to review how we did business, why things were successful, and then what that means going forward as to how we ought to operate. So let's go to the next picture if you would. All right, so this is that model, right? So James Forrestal, who you see there, was our Secretary of the Navy at the time, and he's in front of Congress in 1947 talking about naval research, and he described the model, and then here's what James Forrestal said, and I got to read this so I get it right. That quote continues. So at the end of that well-rounded program of research and development, he says, to fail to do so in time of peace will surely result in this country entering another war with obsolete weapons and machines of warfare. And the tempo of modern war has reached the point where this nation will probably never again have the opportunity to arm itself successfully after the start of hostilities. So imagine James Forrestal standing before you today and seeing the pace of technology that exists in 2018 and what that means for our ability to translate scientific discovery across a broad range of disciplines into naval power, because that's our charter. That's what we do. And that's what I think about every day. So I think, is this model still the one? If not, what's the model that we need to operate in to get to the place where we never allow a fair fight for our sailors and Marines? So go to the next picture. So there's our post-World War II model, and my hypothesis is that the model still works. Why? Because the environment that's been created in the intervening 70 years has been robustly fed, maintained, and made pretty darn effective by folks like you, who recognize that our academic institutions, that's the center of gravity for ideation, the creation, the scientific discovery, and the people that we need to be connected with as a military service. And our model has been, ONR as the first federally funding agency of research, our model has been replicated over and over and over, and it's been taken by others. So the model still works. The government sits astride this scientific discovery with folks who understand how we're going to apply that to naval power. So we can look left, understand technology, look right, understand how that will apply to the sailors and Marines, and then we work with our industry partners in the defense industries to get capability at scale, to productionize that to a point where it's usable by our sailors and Marines. Good model. My conclusion is that the model still is good. However, let's keep pressing. The business and the behaviors inside that model are no longer the answer. We have to change how we're doing business inside that model, because we have to recognize that it's not 1947, it's not the 1950s, and the nature of federally funded research at the basic and all the way through the chain level is not the same as it used to be, right? It used to be kind of like little kids' soccer. Federal funding for a certain discipline or a certain idea, a certain thing would go in a direction, and everybody would move that direction. It's not the case anymore. You all know that. These marketplaces, and more the technology marketplace in a number of disciplines, is driven by commercial investment, and it's global in nature. That's a different ecosystem to operate in as the Office of Naval Research, and to try to find the human beings who are making the discovery, connect to them, and then be able to watch them, leverage them, follow them, or fully fund them because they're working on something that is uniquely applicable to naval warfare, and we're not going to find it anywhere else. So we've got to be pretty active inside this incredible group of actors that make up this ecosystem, and you see some of them there. And we need to be attached robustly to those who are driving the marketplace so that we can watch how that goes. And then once we understand how that's all moving, we have to be able to act on it. And that's been our problem, is how do you act on it in an establishment, in an institution that's driven by the funding mechanisms that we have inside of the DoD and inside the Navy, and the certainty of that funding, and then how we go discuss where opportunities exist and how we manage risk. So this all becomes a balance that is much different today than it has been, and it needs to move farther into the opportunity space than we're going to manage risk space. The problem is we've got a lot of people and a lot of muscle memory that are wedded to all those behaviors that have done very well for us for the past 70 years. And this is my challenge. So every day I think about this, and every day I implore my folks, 4,000 strong as you heard Chris talk about, to go out and make your network more robust, understand what's happening out, not just in your space, but the entire space. Where is the ideation occurring that we're not aware of? Figure out if we're connected or not, and then figure out how we're going to go take advantage of that. So inside of our small part of this, which is the Navy unique things, we work with our programs of record. And inside the DoD vernacular, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, those programs of record that's where all the big money is, right? That's where we get capability at scale. We build ships, we outfit those ships. We build submarines, we outfit Marines. We build aircraft, we bring warfare systems and weapon systems onto those. And then we keep them for a lot of years. So we're continuously in this modernization stroke over our capital investments, our platforms. The warfighting capability that we need to deliver largely will come not just from the platform, but more and more with what we can bake into it. So, the big money's in the program of records. Our job is to be able to connect to them properly. What we discovered as we started to look at the statistics that surround our ability to find the right actors, the right discovery, turn it into something that would be useful to our programs of record, and then to move it into those programs of record over the last 15 years was not where I wanted it to be. So we reimagined our process, and we created a new process going forward that creates what I'll call a shared destiny with those who create and those who need to bring capability at scale. It's very easy for somebody on the other end of one of these deals to look at someone like me and say, we want you to go resource this technology project, and when you're done, we'll be happy to take it and integrate it into our program of record and fund it and get it out there to initial operating and final operating capability. Happy to go do that. Happy for you to spend the research dollars and those early R&D dollars to make that happen. They weren't bought into that project. And as I was speaking with some of the ARPA-E members before this session, all the magic that ever happens in this business happens at the project level. So if they're not bought into the project, what we found, not surprising, is that at the end of those, they would look at it and say, that's a wonderful thing you've done, but our requirements changed, I don't have the funding, I don't have the risk appetite to take that into my program of record, so thanks, but no thanks. So we've recreated a shared destiny as we move through any of these projects where there's money on the research and development side, my side of the equation, there's money on the program of record side, where the big money is, and that's where we get capability at scale anyway. And now every one of those projects, if it's going to press forward, moves as a shared funding project, and then we create this shared destiny and this commitment that we're going to field it. And we look at those through the lens of, when are you going to field it once it's in your court? And if the answer is, it's ready, but it'll take us 5 years, that's no longer interesting us to generate naval power to deter somebody on the world's oceans from acting badly, because that may not be enough time. So the behaviors that we're after inside of our part of the ecosystem are to accelerate the movement of technology and pick those things where opportunity exists to move the needle significantly, and then dive in and give them our full attention and focus. How does that relate to you? So go to the next picture. Every single one of the platforms, be it the Marine, all the way to that nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, carry all of their power and energy with them. I recently had the opportunity to go on the USS Gerald R. Ford, the CVN-78. Had a great conversation with the crew about the advancements that have been moved into that ship. Phenomenal warfighting platform. And we talked a little bit about something that would seem pretty mundane. It wasn't about the main propulsion train and the big, large reactor plants that drive that. We talked about, how do you manage all the networks on board that you have? Turns out that we're very interested these days in how do we harness our data so that we can predict and forecast, and not just for how is our system operating, but how do we empower those people who are on platforms like this to fight their platform and fight at machine speed. The only way to do that is to harness all the data that goes with all of the systems on that ship. Well, it turns out that the data on that ship is spread about a number of networks. I won't tell you the number because it's a lot. It would make your head hurt. It made my head hurt. And then further, you start diving into that and you ask the question, well, where did those networks all come from? Well, they were provided to us by the individual programs of record that created them. Now, what are the odds that each of those programs of record that created a tailored network to work on a certain part of the data set instantiated that network in a way that would have the same uninterruptible power supply associated with that network? What are the odds? Exactly 0, right? So in and amongst those numbers of networks, you're looking at 250-odd uninterruptible power supplies of 15 different designs. Think about that logistics train over time. We're such great system engineers at the subsystem level that we end up suboptimizing the whole thing. And that's because we have been in this mode where everything moves through that program of record. And we've been unable to step back and look at the opportunity space that exists if we look across all of those things. So from a power and energy perspective, where the power comes from, that Marine on the ground carries, I don't know, about 60 to 65 pounds worth of gear, not including food. That's a lot of stuff to carry around all the time. Batteries sometimes make up 10 to 15 pounds of that. Different sets of power sources help that Marine out significantly. Solar power, 27-pound unit that we're asking them to carry. That's not so good. Lasts a couple of hours and it's got to recharge. Weather dependent, may or may not be useful. So we can use your help there. All the way up to how do we think differently about stored energy for lots of purposes on something like the CVN 79 or the CVN 80 or 81 or 82. So the opportunities for you and everything in between, right? So the opportunities for you to work with us to find places where your company, your academic institution, your outfit, whatever part of this ecosystem you play in, to have a place to explore the use of your technology or idea, we're open to it. My understanding is that we have worked with you in the past. And mostly working with you means some of you know a guy named Dr. Rich Carlin, right? If you know Rich Carlin, thank you. Rich is a great entry point to the Office of Naval Research, but he's not the only one. So we want to engage with you in a robust way. And we want to bind with you in an institutional way because it's clear that it's going to take all of us to solve these problems, right? So if your idea is about thermal management systems for directed energy weapons, if it's about power management for things like electromagnetic launch or recovery of aircraft, it's about how do we get to a common set of standards across a set of platforms that need to take everything with them when they go, we're interested. We're interested in not just a technology, but we're interested in different ways of doing business. So everything inside the model is up for grabs. The only parts of that model, in my mind, that are sacred cows are we're going to continue to work with our academic institutions, and we're going to do that at all levels. We're going to continue to depend on our very well-educated, well-versed in naval warfare, very well-connected government workforce, and that includes uniformed and civilians, to be those folks who are the spotters of those things that will get us to a capability that matters and to take advantage of it. And we're going to continue to work with our industry partners to get to production at scale. Because what we've also discovered as we've looked into this problem is that as the ecosystem moved around in the 90s and the 2000s, we lost the playbook. And we asked everybody to play a little bit of everybody else's position. And so when you're trying to throw yourself a pass, and you're trying to block for yourself, and you're trying to coach yourself, pretty soon you run out of people and you run out of an understanding of what role you play and what everybody else on the team is doing. So what I'd ask you to do is keep us honest as we move through time and we engage with you. If you've got a role to play, we want you to do it with us. If you've got an idea, we'll take it. We have a standing BAA, a broad agency announcement that exists to accept any and all. Happy to hear from you, and then we can see where it goes. Now, not every idea is a good idea. You all recognize that, and not every idea has the right timing. So if you get frustrated that we didn't listen the first time, be persistent. One of the stories that I like to tell is that back in the 1920s, there was this young man who walked into the bureau, one of the bureau offices at the time inside the Department of the Navy. And this young man described to the naval officer who sat across him that he had this interesting idea about how you could split an atom and how that would result in a way to harness some power that might be useful to the naval service. So after that young man left, naval officer looked at another one and the guy says, "What's that all about?" He said, I don't really know, but he sure did talk with a funny accent. So Enrico Fermi walked on his way and he went and did something else. So the Navy missed that opportunity. I don't want to be that Navy. So we're open to listening to you, and we'll see where it takes us. As Forrestal finishes out that story, and he tells the Congress that it's important that we're ready for the next set of hostilities, and we have to be ready before it starts, he said, "The example I'll give you is the phenomenon of radar. In 1922, the Naval Research Lab, in fact, the one just up the river, discovered the phenomenology associated with radar. Everybody knew about this. Our potential adversaries in that conflict in World War II knew about that phenomenology too. The advantage that we as a Navy gained was because we were able to do something with that. And in Forrestal's estimation, looking back on that, he said that was wholly unsatisfying. It was unsatisfying because of the ad hoc network that existed to get to the point that we could take advantage of the discovery of science that had occurred decades before it was implemented. Again, the pace and speed of technology are moving now orders of magnitude greater than they were when Forrestal made his statement. So we have an imperative to be better connected with you so that when science is discovered and you see an application that can help us, again, power and energy are the great enabler for a naval force, then we're listening. So the challenge I'll leave you with is that today your U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps will always be playing an away game. When that away game occurs, everything that we need, we take with us. That's our ordnance, that's our power, that's our food, and if we expect the conflict to be over quick, we're not going to have a chance to resupply. We're not going to have a chance to establish a long logistics trail that can be there and help us out. We need more efficiency. We need better management of the power we have on board. When we get to the point where we have a robust implementation of electric weapons to include high-energy lasers, potentially railguns, electric power on our ships for main propulsion power, we're going to need better systems that we can leverage across all those capital platforms. We depend on you to do that. So if there's an answer out there, and I think there is, we need to hear it. So my challenge to you is engage with us. The Navy needs you. Those platforms need you. Those sailors need you. If you don't do it, somebody else will. And I'm talking about another nation state will, and then they'll have the advantage. Your Navy plays an away game. We have unique challenges that you have to help us with. So with that, I will leave you to the challenge. Tomorrow you're going to hear from Rich Carlin. If you're here for that panel discussion, engage him robustly and ask him, what are the mechanisms by which we can help? And are you the only guy inside the naval research enterprise that we need to contact? And the answer should be no. So I thank you very much for your attention today. I thank you for your interest in your United States Navy and Marine Corps and the military writ large. And I look forward to partnering with you to bring some advancement that nobody thought of to a ship, a submarine, or an airplane near you. So thank you very much.